Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. I hope everybody is doing well. We're holding on in Chelek Hey on Nun Gimel Amid Aleph. We are in Hilchas Pesach, Siman Taf Nun Hey, and we are up to Sif Vav. So the Mechaber says here on Sif Vav, Losh Hamatzah Beketzach V'Shumshimin Uvemine Tavalin Keshera. Let's say you needed the dough for the matzah, and you added some sort of spices. So you added ketzach, says the Mishnah Berurah in Eis Cotton Mem Daled, Beketzach, Kimmel, Balashon Ashkenaz. So the Mishnah Berurah says that what is ketzach? Ketzach is Kimmel. So again, I see somebody just joined here on YouTube. So we're at Sivav. I'm betting that that's Willie. It says over here, Losh HaMatzah Beketzach. If you needed the matzah dough and you added ketzach, which the Mishnah Berurah said is Kimmel, V'shumshimin, or you added sesame, uvemine tavalin, you added other sorts of spices to this matzah. Keshera, the matzah is kosher. Kevan sheyesh ba tam matzah, because the matzah is going to have tam matzah. As long as it tastes like matzah, you could be yotzah. However, the Mechaber says, umikol makaim ein litan ba tavalin. Nevertheless, says the Mechaber, even though technically you could add spices to the matzah, nevertheless, says the Mechaber, you should not add spices to the matzah, because the nature of spices are that they're sharp, they have a sharp taste, and we're afraid that that sharpness somehow is going to speed up the chimutz process, the fermentation process, and now the dough might become chametz faster than in 18 minutes. It might become chametz faster than a shear mill. Haggah, the Ramah says, upilpulin, and to add pepper to the matzah, afilu b'di'evet aser. That's forbidden even b'di'evet. Even b'di'evet, if post facto, if you did add pepper to the dough is aser, not allowed to use it. And that's because pepper is exceedingly sharp, and that is going to have an effect. It's going to speed up the chimutz process. V'chein im nafal ba sid. And the Ramah adds also, if some type of cement, sid is usually lime, some type of cement, if it fell into the matzah dough, that also would aser the dough, that would render the dough for the matzah prohibited. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here. We already did Ois Cotton Mem Daled, where he identified Ketzach as Kimmel. Now we go to Ois Cotton Mem Hey. Keshera, the Mechaber said if you add spices to the dough, it's kosher. So kosher means it's kosher, you're allowed to use it. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Miloshin Zeh, from this language that the Mechaber chooses to use, where he says that the dough is keshera, mashma, the implication is, as long as you have a kezayis of matzah dough in a matzah, in an amount of matzah that if you would spend 3 to 9 minutes eating it, that's the amount of time kedei achilas pras, the amount of time it takes to eat a loaf called a pras. So in contemporary halacha, we say that that's somewhere between eating for 3 minutes and 9 minutes. So as long as you have a kezayis of matzah dough in a piece of matzah the size of kedei achilas pras, v'yesh ba tam matzah, and it tastes like matzah, yotzeba. So what this means is you have a piece of matzah that it would take you 3 minutes to eat, let's say, if 3 minutes is kedei achilas pras, and in that size matzah, you have a kezayis of grain-based dough. You would be yotza. Now, the chiddush over here is, you might think that the spices that you add to the dough do not add to the minimum shear of achilas matzah. In order to be yotza your mitzvah of eating matzah, you need to eat a kezayis of matzah. So now the question is, the Mechaber said that technically speaking, you're allowed to add spices to the dough. Okay, but now let's say you have exactly a kezayis. When you eat the kezayis, are you eating a kezayis of matzah? Not really. You're eating, let's say, a fraction of a kezayis less than matzah, and that fraction is made up of the spices. So did you eat a kazayas of matzah? No, not really. Over here, the Mishnah Berurah is telling you that from the mechaber, it would seem that as long as you have a kazayas of matzah in a piece that is kedei achilas pras, you're yoitza the mitzvah if you eat a kazayas of that matzah, as long as it tastes like matzah, even though technically you didn't eat a kazayas of pure matzah. However, the Mishnah Berurah does say, "V'ayin b'pri chadash of a Magen Avram." If you look at the pri chadash in the Magen Avram, you'll see shadai tam. 1 second, something just popped up on my screen here. Yes, okay. Shadai tam. Their opinion is that tzarich le'echol kol achilas pras. You would have to eat the entire achilas pras. So, in other words, you have this piece of matzah that has a kazayas of matzah in it if you would eat it for 9 minutes. So we're saying that that's okay. But the Pri Chadash and the Magen Avram say, yeah, it's okay. But you have to eat the entire Kedei Achilas Pras so that you make sure that ultimately you ate a kazayas of matzah. If you only eat a kazayas of the loaf, then you're not yotzei the mitzvah because you didn't eat a kazayas of matzah. So you have to eat the full Kedei Achilas Pras to make sure that you eat a kazayas of matzah. Kedei sheyeh bazeh kazayas matzah chutz mitvolim, so that you could know that you ate a kazayas of matzah without the spices. Not that the spices weren't in there, but you have to eat the full loaf. That full loaf you have to eat, even though it's more than a kazayas. Why? Because you, in order to get a kazayas of matzah, right, without including the spices in the measurement, you have to eat the full loaf. We already discussed this question when we spoke about a dough that was made up, let's say, not only of wheat flour. Let's say you made a dough that was wheat flour and it had kidneys mixed into it. Let's say it had rice flour mixed into it. So we said over there that there was a machlokes over there where we said that if you have kedei achilas pras of dagan, of let's say wheat, right? So we said it was okay. But we had the same question. Do you have to make sure that you eat a kazayas of the wheat? Over there we said that lechatchila you have to make sure that the majority of the dough is made out of wheat. That way the whole thing is considered wheat. And now even if you don't eat a kazayas of the wheat dough, if the kazayas that you ate was partially made up of wheat dough and partially made up of kidneys dough, you're going to be yotzei anyway, because since it's roiv wheat, so the whole dough goes after the roiv, and the whole dough is considered wheat dough. V'achinami binyanenu. The Mishnah Berurah says also over here we would have the same concept. If roiv of the dough is wheat dough and there's only a little bit of spices in it, so then we negate the fact that the spices are comprising part of the kazayas that you ate, because it goes after the roiv, and the roiv is wheat dough, so it's all considered wheat dough. Ois cotton memvav, and the mechaber said, why is this okay? Because it has tam matzah. Shei memvav sheyesh ba tam matzah mashma the yotzin ba yedei chayva b'layla harishona mishum deloy chashiva matzah ashira. Again, by the mechaber saying that this is kosher because it has tam matzah. The implication over here is that this dough is kosher. You could be yotzei your chiyuv of achilas matzah by the seder. You could be yotzei your chiyuv daraisa of achilas matzah with this dough because it is tam matzah. It tastes like matzah, meaning it doesn't have the taste of the spices, and therefore we're not worried that it's considered matzah ashira, that it's rich matzah and it's not lechem oini. If it's not lechem oini, you can't be yotzei the mitzvah. Or memela, a side point the Chavetz Chaim comes out with, since you could be yotzei the mitzvah by the seder eating this matzah, it therefore comes out that asar la'achla be'erev Pesach. You would not be allowed to eat this matzah on erev Pesach. Remember, on erev Pesach, you're not allowed to eat any type of matzah that you could be yotzei the mitzvah with at Pesach night. So if you're telling me that you could be yotzei the mitzvah of achilas matzah with this spiced matzah, then you can't eat this spiced matzah on erev Pesach. However, there are those that say that when the mechaber says that this matzah is kosher, he means that this matzah is kosher for the rest of Yom Tov. Why is it kosher? Mishum de'ein ba mishum chimutz mishum atvolin. Because what the Mechaber is telling you is that the addition of the spices to the dough don't make a chimutz problem. And therefore, you're allowed to eat this matzah on Pesach. But you want to be yotze the mitzvah with this dough? That you can't do. You can't be yotze the mitzvah of achilas matzah with this matzah. Avali b'chlal matzah ashira, it would be considered matzah ashira. Ve'ein yotze b'yidei chayva b'shnei leilos harishainim, and you cannot be yotze the mitzvah of achilas matzah on the 2 nights of Pesach, the 2 Seder nights. The yesh lahachmir, and the Mishnah Berurah says, really, we should be machmir like this opinion, and we should not be yotze in the mitzvah of achilas matzah with this kind of matzah. Now, the Mechaber said over here that this matzah that you added spices to is kosher. However, the Mechaber said, mikol makaim, nevertheless, ein litain but fallen. You should not add spices to the matzah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut mem zayin. When we come makaim ein litain, ritzoyna loymar, what the Mechaber means to say is the lachatchila ein nachaim, that initially this is not proper. You should not add spices to the matzah. What's interesting about the way the Mechaber wrote this is the Mechaber didn't write it and say that it's kosher, lachatchila you shouldn't do it. The way the Mechaber wrote it was, it's kosher. And then he said, you shouldn't do it. So the Chavetz Chaim was just pointing out to you what the Mechaber meant. The Mechaber meant, l'chatchila, this is not something that you should do. Don't be adding spices to your matzah. The Ramah said that to add pepper is problematic. You cannot add pepper to the matzah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, afilu kairet echad oisek kol ha'itza chametz. Even 1 grain of pepper would render this dough chametz, and it's not allowed to be eaten. V'chein ma'at sid. So too, even a drop of cement, of lime, would also render the isa chametz, and you're not allowed to eat it. V'davka kisheni lo ishpesaychai. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, what does this mean? That a grain of pepper fell into the dough and it renders it aser? That is if it was kneaded together with the pepper. If the pepper fell in and you kneaded the dough with the pepper, then it's prohibited. Avalin nafal alav. But if a grain of pepper fell on top of the matzah, yisal kenu, take it off, umutter, and then it is mutter. I guess the chimutz effect of the pepper is only if it gets kneaded in. If a grain falls on the dough, you could take that grain off. Eiskat memtes, the Ramah said, if pepper gets mixed in, then even b'di'evet, even after the fact, this dough would be aser. Says the Mishnah Berurah, memtes, hainu ba'achila v'loi b'hana. When we say that this dough is aser, that means that it's aser ba'achila. You're not allowed to eat it on Pesach. But it's not aser b'hana. Remember, chametz is aser b'achila, it's also aser b'hana. But when the pepper falls on it, which is only a problem because of a chash of chimutz, then it's aser b'achila, but it's not aser b'hana. The Mefarshim say that this is similar to what we had earlier, if you kneaded the dough with salt, which is also similar to if you kneaded the dough using hot water, using heated water, which we said is a chash chimutz. But if you don't see simanim of chimutz, if you don't see the signs of chimutz, so it's aser b'achila, but it's not aser b'hana. Ice cut nud sid. He mentioned if cement, lime of some type falls into the dough. Hainu sid chai. This means fresh cement. Aval sid shabakaisel. But if you're talking about the mortar that's between the bricks of a building, shekvarnis yavesh, which is already dry, minis kasha ke'even, and it's hard like stone, near a pashat to ein oiser. The Chavetz Chaim says it is pashat. It's obvious, and he brings this down from the Shvus Yaakov, that is not going to render the dough forbidden. Now we turn the page, and we go to Siman Taf Nun Vav. Shir Kamos Lishas Hamatzos. What is the proper measurement for when you need the dough for the matzah? What size dough? What size myra? What size dough should you need? Ubay Gimel Seifim, and we have over here 3 Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Seif Aleph. Ein Loshin LePesach Isa Gedoyla Mishir Chala. We don't need a dough when we're kneading the dough for the matzah. We don't make a dough that's larger than the shear that you need to make a dough to separate challah. Shehi arba'im v'shalosh beitzim v'chaimish beitza beinonim. which would be 43 and a fifth medium-sized eggs, vahu isaron, and that's what we call in the Torah, that is an isaron. That's the asiris ha'efa, a tenth of an ephah, which was the amount of mun that fell for one person. V'chein yisha'er oisa. And now the Mechaber tells you how you should measure this measurement. Yamale kli mayim. Take a keli and fill it up to the top with water. V'ya'ara hamayim mimenu likli acher. Now empty that keli into another keli. V'achakach, and then yitain boy, place into the first keli, which is now empty, arbaim v'shalosh beitzim. Put 43 whole eggs in their shells. Take 43 eggs and put it into the first keli. V'yachzer boy amayim she'era mimenu. Now take the water. Remember, you had a pot. You filled up the pot to the top with water. You took that water, you poured that water off into another pot. Now take 43 whole eggs and put them into the first pot. Now take the water that you poured out of that pot and pour the water into the pot over the 43 eggs. V'hamayim sheyevathru yitneim b'kli acher. Now take the water that didn't fit into the first pot, right? You're going to have water that's not going to fit, which is the displacement of the 43 eggs. The water that you're trying to pour back into the first pot was the full amount of water that originally came from the first pot. Whatever doesn't fit back into the first pot, the reason it's not fitting is because it was displaced by the 43 eggs. Va'kli hamachzik oisam. Now, a keli that will hold the amount of water that was displaced by the 43 eggs, hu hamida lamaloisa mikemach. That's the volume of flour that you could need a dough out of for the matzah. So the Mechaber is telling you a practical way. The amount of dough the amount of flour that you're allowed to use to knead a dough for the matzah is the volume of flour equal to the displacement of 43 eggs. V'hamida mechuka v'loy gedusha. And now you're going to take flour and you're going to pour flour into that keli that holds the displacement of 43 eggs. That is what's called a mida mechuka. You pour the flour in and you kind of wipe it flat. V'loy gedusha, not heaping. You know, when you do a recipe, it says a heaping tablespoon or a regular tablespoon. So over here, we're not looking for a heaping measurement for the flour. It's a flat measurement for the flour. V'shiyura mikemachita mitzris, if you're using flour of Egyptian wheat, chamesh meyois ve'esrem derhem mitzriim b'keruv. It is 520 dirham, which is, I think, an Egyptian finger breadth. Okay, let's stop here for a moment and let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Ois Katan Aleph, Ein Loshen. So let's get back on track here. Let's step away from the technicalities for a moment. The Mechaber told me, what size myra, what size dough can you need for the matzah? It should not be a dough that's larger than the shear of challah. Why? What's that play over here? Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Aleph, Ein Loshen. Lefi sheshiaru chachamim, because the chachamim assessed and figured out shaha'esek she'odam echad misasek b'yadai b'isa b'lisha v'aricha. What size dough can a person manipulate with his hands to knead it and to arrange it, in other words, to form it? Einoi matzila mechimotz kishihi gedola. You will not be able to prevent the dough from becoming chametz by your working it. If you make a myra, if you make a dough that's bigger than this size, then one person is not going to be able to manipulate that dough and work with that dough in order to stop it, to prevent it from becoming chametz. So you're going to have a very large dough. Part of this dough is going to be sitting leidik. nobody's going to be manipulating it. Nobody's going to be working it. And since nobody is working it, a dough that sits is a dough that's ripe to become chametz, right? Especially, we're going to see later that once you start working with a dough, if you stop working with it, now we have a chash. Technically, it may even be able to become chametz in less than 18 minutes, in less than a sheer mil. Now, we don't worry about that lamaisa. We try to speed up the process as much as we can, with as much zrizas as we can, but we say that chametz is not before 18 minutes. But we want to know that if you're going to make a dough, the dough is going to be of a size that a person is going to be able to manipulate it and work with it. And not that he's working with the dough over here, but he's got another 5 yards of dough sticking out over here that are getting no attention and is ripe for becoming chametz. And the Chachamim figured out what size dough could one person work with his hands. That is, as long as it's within the shear of challah. Any larger than that, the person is not going to be able to use his hands to work with it on all of its sides, mitach gadla, because of its great size. Ice cotton bays. The Mishnah Berurah says, Arba'im v'shalish beitzim, 43 eggs. K'moshe hein im haklipos, whole eggs in their shells. We're talking about whole eggs here. Okay. Ice cotton gimel, yesha'er oisa. The Mechaber gave you a practical method of figuring out the displacement of 43 eggs. V'lo al yedei mishkal. What points out the Chavetz Chaim, why does the Mechaber have to give you this whole measuring system to figure out the volume of the displacement of the eggs? Why don't I just take 43 eggs and weigh them? And now I'll weigh the flour. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, this is a volume-based measurement. It's not a weight-based measurement. The kasva achrayim, the achrayim right, shehu shir gimel kvart le'erech, that it is approximately 3 quarts. Ice cotton daled. Oh, we didn't do that yet. Let's go back up into the Ramah. Haggah, the Ramah says, further discussing the measuring of the flour. When you're measuring out the flour, you should not compress the flour. You know, when you put flour into a measuring cup, it could be sifted flour that's loose, or you could take your hands and you could compact it. So if we're talking about volume, we figured out what the volume of the displacement of 43 eggs is. So now we have this keli, now we have this vessel that is the volume of the displacement of 43 eggs, and now we're going to pour flour into it. Okay, but we could pour flour into it until it's full, or we could pour flour into it when it's full and then compact it and then put in more flour. Says the Ramah, no, don't compact it. Do not compact the flour in the measuring vessel. Because of a practical problem. If you do compact the flour, vessel, l'shem mitzvah, that you're doing this l'shem mitzvah. I see that my connection blanked out over there for a second, so I'm just going to read that Mishnah Berurah again here. It said, we just said over here in the Ramah, the Toiv Laimar, it's proper to say, B'shas nesinas hakemach lamida, when you're placing the flour into the measuring vessel, sha'oisa l'shem mitzvah, that you're doing this l'shem mitzvah. We know, we saw the halacha earlier, that the matzah, especially the matzah that you're going to use to be yaitz in the mitzvah, has to be shmura. You need shmura matzah, and need shimur. And we spoke earlier that l'chatchila we want shimur mishas ketzira. Certainly, you need shmira mishas lisha. That everybody holds, that from the time that you're going to combine the flour with the water, you definitely need shmira, because now is when the chimut could start. Over here, the Ramah is telling you that this is another step. As you're getting ready to do the lisha, you should make sure to say that you're doing this l'shem matzahs mitzvah, which means that you're doing it with the recognition that this is matzah you're going to be using to be yaitz in a mitzvah, and it has to be shmura matzah. And you're not mesiach das. You're not blanking out. You're not spacing out from the need to protect the flour from any chash of chimutz. Says the Mishnah Berurah in ice cotton dalid, v'lo yitchak, you should not compress the flour. Hainu, afim kamos akemach einoi machzik ele isaroin oy pachus mizeh. Even if you have less than the required volume. In other words, you're not exceeding the maximum volume. You don't even have a share challah. You have less than a share challah. Still, do not compress it. In other words, Ramah is not telling you don't use more flour than you're allowed to use by compressing it into the measuring receptacle. That's not what he's telling you. He's telling you, even if you have less than a share of challah, still do not compress the flour. Why? Because if you compress the flour, now the flour is not going to knead into a dough well. So the water is not going to combine with the flour. Now, what's the problem with that? Oh, now you're going to have a dough that has clumps of flour in it that were never mixed with water. And now when you bake that dough into matzah, you're going to have a matzah that has flour in it that never combined with water. Now you take that matzah and you drop it into your soup. Apologies to those who don't eat gebruks. But now you take that matzah and you drop it into your soup. Now you have the problem for which reason people don't eat gebruks. Because now you're going to have flour in there. It's going to combine with the liquid, and now it could become chametz. And that's why in the matzah bakeries, you'll see sometimes if you're in the matzah bakery, sometimes the kneter, that's the one who makes the dough, the one who kneads the dough, he'll make a myra, he'll make a dough, and the mashgiach every now and then will take a dough and look at the dough and analyze the dough, break it up, play with it between his fingers and check, is he making a proper dough? Is he mixing it well? It looks like nothing. You should know it's a science. It's not an easy thing. I've done it. When you make a myra, that we're doing everything by hand, we're not using a KitchenAid. You got to get your fingers in there and you got to mix it well. You got to break up all the flour and mix it all with the water. Otherwise, it's very easy to get clumps of flour in there. A good kneter is worth a lot in a matzah bakery. So it says over here, the Mishnah Berurah continues, you should measure out the flour when it's loose, which is the way that flour is measured by volume when it is sold. The Mishnah Berurah continues and he says that even placing your hand on the flour is really not lechatchila. And the reason for that, let me see if the Sharetzion brings it down. I don't think so. I don't think the Sharetzion brings it down. But one of the reasons they bring down why you should not put your hand on the flour is we saw earlier that when you prepare the mayim shalanu, you should not put your hand into the mayim shalanu. If you remember, we said if you have water that's drawn for your mayim shalanu, and then somebody passed away in the city, or if it was the day where the tekufa, where the season changes, so then that water, the custom was to pour it out. But if you throw in a piece of barzel, if you throw in a piece of iron, you could use that water. If you remember, we said that barzel is an acronym for Bilhah, Rachel, Zilpah, and Leah. So the schus of the Mayis HaKadoshos protect us from the problem of mayim that was out when somebody passed away, and the Malach HaMavis was matal dam mavis into that water. The schus of the Mayis HaKadoshos should be magen agans Klal Yisrael. Now everybody needs schusim, everybody needs protection. The schus Rachel Imenu, Zilpah, Bilhah, Leah, they should protect us. So the same way, so we said then that when you're putting the barzel in the water, you shouldn't put your hand in the water, because your hand could increase the temperature of the water and create a chimutz problem. So to over here, don't stick your hand into the flour. Keep the warmth of your hand out of the flour. Ois cotton hay. The Ramah said that at the time that you're pouring the flour into the measuring receptacle, you should verbalize that you're doing this l'shem matzahs mitzvah. Ayin l'kaban b'siman tov samach b'Mishnah Berurah Sif cotton bays, and over there is where he discusses shimur. Okay, I think we're going to stop in the Mishnah Berurah over here today. So we're up to Sif bays. Everybody, thank you for joining me for the share. I can't wait until we could once again start saying the share live. In the meantime, it's a tremendous chus that everybody is doing all of their Torah learning. People aren't shirking away. They're not getting their time wasted on other things. It's so easy to waste time nowadays. Instead, people are turning to the web to learn Torah, see the chesed that the Rebbeinu Shalom was doing for us, that even though we can't get together for a shir, even though Bate Midrashim are closed, that Bate Knesiyos are closed, still we could get together and we could have our shir. We actually have more people watching the shir now than we usually do. I see we have 3 people over here on YouTube, and I see a list of people here on Facebook. It's a tremendous chus for Klal Yisrael. Yossi Tov, I see that you're over there. I read your post. You're very optimistic post. It's wonderful that somebody is putting something, giving a smile, giving a positive spin. I think there's room for the positive spin. Everybody definitely has to look and to see as what's the lashon of Chazal. Everybody knows nige liboy. Everybody knows internally what the things that they have to work on are. I think we all have to take a look, myself included. I don't preach, I'm talking to myself. We all have to take a look and see what lessons can we learn from this. What could we improve on? Maybe our appreciation for Tefillah B'tzibur. Maybe our appreciation for an Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. The Gemara in Bracha says, Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah, the tremendous chus, the tremendous value of Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. Do we take Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah for granted? We can go to shul whenever we want. We could say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. Now we can't say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. So we should have a new appreciation for Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah, a new appreciation for Chazaras Hashatz. We could daven Shemona Esrei, but have a Chazaras Hashatz. You know, Rav Moshe Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh L'Vracha, by Chazaras Hashatz, he stood by Chazaras Hashatz the same way he stood by Shemona Esrei. There was no difference between the way he stood for the Shtil Shemona Esrei and the way he stood for Chazaras Hashatz. He stood for Chazaras Hashatz, he looked in the siddur, he followed in the siddur every word. So and all those amens. Now we don't have those amens. So we have a new appreciation for Tefillah B'tzibur, a new appreciation for Kaddish, a new appreciation for Kedusha, a new appreciation for what it means to have a Bais Medrash to go to learn. We don't have that now. So yes, there's a positive spin also, but also we have to learn the lessons that we could learn. We should all use the opportunity. I had another machshava. I don't want to say it out completely because I have to think it through first, but we see that there are certain things that Chazal say that when it's an eis tzara for the world, people shouldn't engage in. And I could see that, you know, when people are stuck at home, things could go in 2 very different ways. People could be stuck at home during an eis tzara, and they could get sucked into a morass of time wasting and becoming even more dragged down into Gashmias, into Olam Hazeh. Or on the other hand, we could use it as a time to become closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom. You know, now you daven b'yechidus, you don't have to daven fast to keep up with the Shliach Tzibur. Now you can take your time. Now you could take that beautiful art scroll into linear siddur. You could take that siddur now, and you could decide that each day when you say Psuka de Zimri, you're going to pick one Hallelujah, and you're going to look at what all the words really mean. How much of davening have we been saying for years? Somebody would stop you and say, what does it mean? You know, I don't know. Or even if I know literally what the words mean, do I know what pshat really is? Now, you know what? Maybe every day, pick a bracha in Shemona Esrei. Read the translation of a bracha in Shemona Esrei. 19 days, you'll have all the brachas of Shemona Esrei down. So there are so many opportunities here where we could become closer to Barei Olam. We could use this as a period of spiritual upliftment. And Mirtz Hashem, when we come out on the other side of this, and Mirtz Hashem, it should be so fast. Chuas Hashem Keherafayin, in a blink, this could all be over. When we come out on the other side of this, we should come out on the other side uplifted. We should come out on the other side far, far better than we were before. We will appreciate the Ben Adam L'Chaveroi so much more. We'll be able to come out and talk to people and be Ma'urav and Mabrius again. And Mirtz Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom should protect everybody. The Rebbeinu Shalom should be Megan and Gans Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should bring Yeshuas and Refuas to everybody who needs them. And the Rebbeinu Shalom, like Yossi Tov so beautifully said, the Rebbeinu Shalom should bring the Geula Shlema, the Mehera, the Amenu. Amen. Be well.